All right. So, have you ever gotten so excited about a business idea you had, that next big thing,
Oh, yeah.
and you tell everybody about it, your friends, your family, your mom, and they're all like, that's $1 million idea. You're going to be rich.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
But then you launch the idea, you take it to market, and crickets. Nobody's interested.
It's like that sound of silence you don't want.
The worst, right?
The worst.
So today we're diving deep into chapter 1 of the mom test to figure out why that happens and, more importantly, how to avoid it.
Yeah, and it's funny because we kind of sabotage ourselves right out of the gate with this stuff.
Yeah.
We go looking for validation instead of actual honest feedback.
Oh, tell me about it. It's way more fun to hear you're brilliant
Yeah,
than have you really thought this through?
right. Who doesn't love a little ego boost, right? But Fitzpatrick, the author here, he says those nice conversations are actually dangerous
Dangerous how so?
because they lull us into this false sense of confidence, and we miss out on those critical insights that can make or break our idea.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So how do we avoid that trap? What's the secret sauce?
Well, it all starts with asking the right questions. The kind that get people to open up to really share what they're thinking and feeling.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that? Like, give me an example. What's a mom test question?
So imagine you're that entrepreneur again, super excited about your idea. Instead of launching into this big pitch, you start by asking about their experiences. Like, hey, what's the last time you struggled to choose between two different brands of something at the store?
So instead of talking about your amazing product, you're getting them to talk about themselves.
Exactly. Because everyone loves to talk about themselves a little bit, right?
It's true.
And in those stories, in those everyday experiences, that's where those golden nuggets of insight are hiding.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this works. It's like by digging into their stories, we uncover needs and problems that we might never have even thought of.
Precisely. And that's when the real magic happens.
This is really making me rethink how I approach getting feedback on ideas. I know I'm guilty of leading the witness sometimes, trying to steer people towards saying what I want to hear, but it seems like the mom test is more about silencing our inner salesperson and really opening our ears to what people are actually telling us.
100%.
And maybe, just maybe, realizing that our initial idea, while great in theory, might need a little tweaking or a complete overhaul based on that feedback.
That's the hard part.
It is. But that's what we're here to explore today.
That's the journey.
So how about we dive into some specific examples of those mom test questions, the ones that really get people talking? Because I have a feeling our listeners are ready to start putting this into practice.
Let's do it. I've got some good ones up my sleeve.
Okay,
So
good.
let's say, like, you're thinking about building an app to help people track their sleep.
Okay, I like it. Sleep tracker. Lots of people trying to get better sleep these days.
Right. So instead of saying, like, hey, wouldn't it be amazing if you could track your sleep phases and get a personalized sleep report every morning?
Which, by the way, does sound kind of amazing.
Sure, sure. But you'd ask something like, tell me about a time you woke up feeling really well rested. What were you doing the night before?
Oh, I see where you're going with this. You're getting at their actual behaviors and habits, not just their hypothetical interest in an app.
Exactly. Or you could ask, like, how often do you actually think about your sleep? Not just when you're lying awake at 3 a.m.
Yeah, or what's the one thing that keeps you up at night, like stressing, thinking about, get to the root of the problem?
Yes, and Fitzpatrick talks about this a lot in the book, about focusing on the past.
Okay, so instead of asking, would you ever use a sleep tracking app? I should ask, what?
Tell me about the last time you tried to improve your sleep. What'd you do?
Because what people say they're going to do and what they actually did, two totally different things.
Totally. And remember, we're looking for those concrete details. Instead of, do you have trouble falling asleep? Try. On average, how long does it take you to fall asleep at night?
Because there's a big difference between someone who tosses and turns for an hour and someone who's like, oh, yeah, I usually fall asleep within 5 minutes.
Huge. And you can get even more specific, like, was there ever a time when you consistently slept really well? What was different back then?
Oh, I love that, because maybe they were doing yoga every day, or maybe they didn't own a TV back then, who knows? But those little details are gold.
Right, and they might not even realize those connections until you start asking.
Yeah.
And that brings us to rule number 3, which is all about listening.
Okay, I feel like I need a reminder on this one. I'm a talker by nature.
Aren't we all? But in this context, we got to quiet those voices in our heads and actually hear what people are telling us.
So less talking, more. What's the phrase? Active listening.
Yes.
Mm.
Active listening, like really paying attention, not just waiting for your turn to talk,
Yeah.
and asking follow-up questions that show you're engaged.
So, like, if someone says they tried meditating for better sleep, don't jump in with, oh, yeah, meditation's amazing. You should try Headspace. It's only like
Exactly. Resist the urge. Instead, you could say, what was it about meditating that you found helpful? Or even just, tell me more about that.
simple but effective.
Right. You're essentially giving them permission to be the expert on their own experience.
So we've done our homework, we've talked to people, really listened to them, and now we've got all these insights swirling around. What's next? How do we turn all this mom test wisdom into an actual business?
Well, Fitzpatrick says, pretty bluntly, that having a problem worth solving doesn't mean you have a business.
Okay, so just because people are nodding along saying, yeah, I have that problem too, doesn't mean they're going to throw money at me when I launch my solution.
Sadly, no. And this is where it gets tricky because a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, we get so excited about the solution, about building something cool, that we skip over that crucial step of like validating the business model itself.
Right, we haven't even talked about pricing or marketing or any of that yet. We've just been in this world of like problems, problems, problems.
Exactly. And those problems are important, don't get me wrong, but they're just the starting point.
Yeah.
Fitzpatrick actually says, and I love this line, you aren't allowed to tell them their problem, and they aren't allowed to tell you the solution.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, break that down for me. What does that even mean?
It means, like, we can't go into these conversations with a predetermined agenda trying to force people into a box.
So, no more leading the witness.
No more. Because even if we get them to agree that they have the problem we think they have, and even if they love our solution, there's still a big piece missing. Are they willing to pay for it? And if so, how much and how often?
All the important questions.
All the questions that, honestly, we as entrepreneurs are often afraid to ask because we're scared of the answers.
It's true. We don't want to hear that our brilliant idea is only worth like $5 a month to someone.
Right. But here's the thing. Wouldn't you rather know that now, before you've sunk months of your life and thousands of dollars into building something that nobody's actually going to buy?
100%. So how do we get those answers? How do we know if we're onto something that has real business potential?
It's a combination of things. One, like we talked about, is listening for those patterns in the conversations.
Mm.
Which problems seem to be the most urgent, the most emotionally charged? Which ones are people actively trying to solve, even if it's with duct tape and string?
Because if they're already hacking together their own solutions, that shows there's real demand, right?
Absolutely. And it gives you a starting point for thinking about pricing. Like if they're already spending X amount of dollars on workarounds, maybe they'd be willing to pay a little bit more for something that actually works.
Makes sense. So it's not just about identifying the problem, it's about understanding the value of solving it.
Exactly. And that value can be different for different people. Maybe for one person, it's about saving time. For another person, it's about reducing stress. And for someone else, it's about feeling more in control.
So part of this process is about like figuring out who our ideal customer is, right? Because not everyone is going to value the same things equally.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And that's where things like market research and competitive analysis come in. But even before we get to that stage, the mom test gives us this amazing framework for having those initial conversations that set us up for success.
It's like it all comes back to asking the right questions and then, maybe more importantly, shutting up and listening to the answers.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So if you're out there listening to this and you've got that next big idea brewing, don't keep it to yourself. But before you go pitching it to every investor in sight, grab a copy of the mom test, have a few honest conversations with your target audience, and really listen to what they have to say. It might just be the best business decision you ever make.